You're watching Morning in the Mountains on the Mountain Fun Life channel. Frank Murphy here, and we get to talk about bears. We love talking about bears on Mountain Fun Life. Matt Cameron from TWRA is back. Thanks for coming back.
I'm surprised I get to come back, but thank you.
Well, you're a good spokesperson for TWRA. I mean, you started out there in the field and worked your way up to the desk job here.
Indeed.
But you still got on the armor. You know, you're still ready to go out there and do the field work if necessary.
Well, looking the part is half the job, as one of my old bosses said.
Oh, all right.
I get that part right.
Oh, cool. Well, we're at the point in the year where the bear activity, I think, may start to slow down here and around the Smoky Mountains. Because over the summer, we've had so many stories, and over the fall, about bears that have apparently learned how to honk horns, open car doors. I think they're going to start driving pretty soon. I think it's going to be Planet of the Bears, is what I'm personally concerned about. But what are bears doing now that it becomes December, January, February?
Yeah, we look forward to early December and January and February because bears go into dens. And in general, the sows, the female bears, will go in first, especially if they're pregnant, because they have their cubs while they're in the den.
I heard you should never aggravate a mama bear, and you just called her a sow. That doesn't sound very nice.
You know, yeah, you said they're pretty smart learning to drive.
I
they
think
learn
that's
how
next.
to interpret English.
I think they're going to be right after you for calling her a sow.
They may, but yeah, that's what the female bear is called. And
okay,
our hunting season is designed now to where most of the bulk of it is when the females go into den, so we can protect that female and protect her cubs. Years ago, the hunting season was much earlier, and hunters were taking the female bears out and losing a lot of cubs.
So we don't want that.
Correct. So now,
so is it you're allowed to hunt a male bear in this time of year? Or
you can kill female bears, but you can't kill one that has cubs with her, and her cubs will stay with her for a year and a half. So if she gives birth, let's say January and February, while she's in her den, those cubs will stay with her for a year and a half, going into their second year of life. And so next season, if she's got young with her, you can't legally take her.
So now most of us, unfortunately, have our knowledge of bears based on cartoons. So we picture the bear laying in a cave with the Z's coming up in the, like on a cartoon. But that's not actually the reality of bears, quote unquote, hibernating. It's what do you call it?
It's called torpor. And yes, Hollywood has led us to believe that all bears go into caves and hibernate.
Yeah.
If they can find a cave to get into, sure, they'd probably use it. But the fact is there's not that many caverns to house them all. So they look for hollow tree cavities in general.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
So a dead tree, that's why it's a good idea to leave a dead tree on your property, because wildlife uses it.
Yeah.
And here in East Tennessee, particularly bears will. So 20 to 60 feet off the ground, if they can climb and get down inside that hollow tree.
That's a nice den.
Oh, they love it because they're very confined in there. They can retain their body heat, and they're off the ground away from anything bothering them. Even people, most people aren't going to climb up there and mess with them.
Just some guy with a chainsaw
come along and cut them out.
That tree and a bear comes out.
So yeah, leave the dead trees.
Pretty wild. All right, but the torpor is not a deep hibernation. They're not like out for the year or for the winter rather. Would you describe it?
Black bears aren't true hibernators.
And that's what we're talking about in the Smokies, black bears.
Southeastern United States bears, they go into torpor, and it's like hibernation, except they're sleeping and they can wake up. And if the weather gets warm in the middle of the winter, sometimes they'll wake up, get out of bed, and they think it's springtime already, and they realize, hey, it's not time for me to get up yet, so they go back into torpor.
Do they go eat something while they're up? I mean, let's see
if they can find something, they may. In mild winters, sometimes bears don't go into torpor at all. They'll stay on the ground and continue looking for food. And that's usually when we've had a poor mast year, like if there was a poor acorn crop, for example.
Now, mast means acorns, and what else?
Mast is food. There's hard mast and soft mast. So like berries would be soft mast, hard mast would be like hickory nuts, acorns, the food for wildlife.
All right, cool.
So if there's not a lot of food for them, in other words, they'll stay on the ground and continue to look for food. And that's when we have bear issues even throughout the wintertime, because they're looking for the easy meal in your garbage can.
But this year, 2019, I thought I had a lot of acorns around my house. So was that a sign that it was a good mast year?
I think so. Despite the dry conditions that we had, a lot of people thought, gosh, the trees will just, they won't produce nuts, but they did. They had enough water from the springs. We had a really wet spring and summer and had a dry spell, but it didn't seem to affect the mast production. So yeah, had a good year. The bears should go into their winter dens like normal, and they'll be in there for a few months.
Well, does that affect the bear population also? I mean, when you have a milder winter or a milder summer or any kind, we had like you said, a very wet spring, a very, very hot summer that extended into October. How does that affect the bear population?
Well, yeah, weather certainly affects bears, and most notably the food production. But we got by this year because of that wet spring, so the food is there. So they're well fed. They're going to go into their dens. Now, in the years where there's not a lot of hard mast for them, like when there's a mast failure, like in the park back in 2007, I'm wanting to say there was a mast failure. Bears will get killed by the hunters because they are going to move long distances looking for food, and that makes them susceptible to hunting. So yes, it does affect the population, but we need to take more bears out because we took a record 759 bears last year, I believe, and we still had bear calls out the wazoo all summer. So we have a lot of bears in Tennessee.
A lot of bears.
Yes, sir.
Well, Matt Cameron, thank you so much for educating us on torpor, the milder form of hibernation.
Correct.
And he calls a mama bear a sow. I guess that's the real thing, right?
That's what they're called. Yes, sows and boars.
Okay, I did not know that. I thought that was that's interesting. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. You can find out more by Googling TWRA and look for Matt Cameron and all this other interesting stuff on their website behind us. You're watching Morning in the Mountains on Mountain Fun Life. I'm Frank Murphy. We'll be back with more right after this.